one of the things I want to talk about is libertarianism. Now, what is libertarianism? You'll find books like the one I brought here. This is a good book if you want to understand libertarianism. David Boaz. It's a pretty good survey of the different thoughts of different libertarians. It's kind of a, well, it's a primer, it says right on the front.
I don't know if I've ever seen that book.
No?
I think so.
It's a pretty mainstream book, and it's pretty helpful because it basically canvasses what he considers to be libertarian thought. And of course, there's a lot of people he mentions in here.
Is he a libertarian himself, or is he?
Yes.
Okay.
He's a vice president of the Cato Institute at the time of writing this. And he, of course, like all libertarians tend to, he includes objectivism within libertarianism. And the reason he does that is because, well, aren't we both saying the same thing about the political philosophy? Aren't we both saying that government has to make sure that all relations between individuals are consensual? The interesting thing is not even all libertarians say that. Libertarians have different views about what the role of government is even, or whether or not people have rights, and etc.
Or whether there should be government.
Or whether there even should be government. So it's, but I don't want to get into all that too much. I don't even want to get into too much about what libertarianism is, but I just want to use libertarianism as a compare and contrast to show how our philosophy would be used in government, by government. If you were sitting in the legislature, why would the philosophy and when would the philosophy come in handy? And I'm going to do it by reference to real life examples that have actually faced Ontario and or the legislature. So let's start with how the libertarian, well, actually, let's deal with it this way. You're in the legislature, and someone proposes, as they did in 2008, that the Lord's Prayer, it's outdated because society has many more religions than it used to. And at first, I think Dalton McGuinty was saying, let's get rid of the Lord's Prayer. Let's not open the session every day with, or the proceedings every day, officially with the Lord's Prayer. He quickly got some bad feedback about that, and within a day or three, he said, no, what I was saying is we need to have a different kind of opening prayer, something that's more accommodating of all religions. And I thought, that's not what you meant originally. You were going to secularize the proceedings.
Sure.
Now you've sensed that you're getting lashback, so what you're changing your tone. You're saying, no, I was just talking about a more secular type of, or multi-denominational prayer. That didn't matter, because some people said, it's tradition to say the Lord's Prayer. We've got to keep saying Lord's Prayer. Well, you know who that was. That was the conservatives, the traditionalists, and etc. And they wanted the Lord's Prayer to stay. So ultimately, what did they do? They set up a committee, an all-party committee, so that they could blame whatever happened on that committee instead of on Dalton McGuinty. And that committee came up with a solution. Every day, we'll still say the Lord's Prayer. Well, that kept all the traditionalists happy. Plus, we'll add one prayer from each of these other 8 religions. So now they say 2 prayers every day. The Lord's Prayer plus one other one. And they just rotate through. So it'll be Hindu one day, it'll be Jewish the next, it'll be, and there's 8.
It got worse.
No.
Yeah. And so you literally have now Steve Peters. I don't know how he keeps a straight face, but he's up there at the front of the legislature at 9 o'clock every morning saying the Lord's Prayer and then some other prayer. Well, imagine this, saying a prayer that says, it says what the Lord's Prayer does. I'm sure you've all heard it before. And then saying a prayer that says, Allah, you are the only God. Well, wait a minute, who was this other guy we were talking to in the first prayer? Or another one that says, I wed myself to thee, O whoever this other God is, and only to thee, and no other God shall enter my life, and etc. It's just so hypocritical on its face. It's ridiculous. Anyway, what does the libertarian say? Imagine you're a libertarian, right? And you're libertarian in the legislature, and someone says, let's get rid of the prayers. Now, I'm not talking about you as a Freedom Party person or you as an objectivist or what have you, but you as a person who thinks that the purpose of government is only to make sure that life, liberty, and property isn't violated. So you're a libertarian. All you care about is the politics. What's your answer? What's your position on prayer in the legislature, Mr. Libertarian?
What's my position?
Not your real position, but the libertarian position.
What do I think a libertarian would say?
Yes.
that I guess that they would be going on consent. Anybody that's forced to do a prayer that's not in accordance with their beliefs is force, and they're against force. So
I think you're dead on. Any other?
What I've heard from a libertarian was they feel that the government is inherently evil, and the less time the government spends screwing us,
They could spend all day praying.
so they could spend all day praying, but because it takes the 8-hour day and it shortens it by 10 minutes.
Hang on a sec, let's write that down.
That is good.
That's funny.
Anybody else wanted to chime in on what they think a libertarian would say?
Yeah, I think that they would probably actually relish the thought of having multicultural prayers in there because they don't care about your personal beliefs whatsoever.
Right. I think ultimately, my own guess is that it would be a non-issue for the libertarians. Matt?
I think the very act of praying was just served to put the proceedings into a certain context, the context of religion in the case of prayer. And of course, seeing as the government should be secular and a libertarian government should serve its people, it would be appropriate if the government prayed to the people, to the constituents, to their principles, just to reaffirm, that what principles they stand for, to remind themselves of the guidelines within which these proceedings should go on. And there's absolutely no need to invoke any deity, but
No, that's what you would say, right?
Yeah, something.
So something like a pledge instead of a
Well, I am a libertarian, so.
Well, I'm going to challenge that, actually.
Okay.
But I think all of those answers are libertarian answers, and I don't think they're all necessarily compatible. Some of the answers said, let's get rid of it. Some of the answers said, more the better, because we'll waste more time. Some of the answers said, let's make sure that whatever the prayer is, it's to the people, and etc. I think those are all libertarian answers, and that's why they're all conflicting. Because libertarianism ultimately has no one metaphysical thing. Reality is not the base for libertarianism. It doesn't care whether you're dealing with the supernatural or the natural. Whatever. We don't care about that stuff. All I care about is consent. All I care is you don't force me. All I care about is making sure I'm accountable to the people. All I care is the government doesn't do anything, and so on. And all of those are sort of general themes within libertarianism, but they're all political themes. They're all at that last stage of philosophy. None of them are dealing with what is the nature of reality. What? What's that got to do with government? Right?
Rand called it a floating abstraction.
Yes.
If you have consent up here without the fundament of the metaphysics, the epistemology, and the reason, then it's a floating abstraction. It will fall.
Absolutely. And the reason it falls because it has no integrity. If you two had really strong libertarian views on this particular subject, you might come to blows over a beer. And you'd accuse the other guy of not being a libertarian. You would. I've seen it.
I've seen it happen many times. That's a good example.
Yeah.
She ain't libertarian, Sunny libertarian.
Now, what's happening in principle, okay? Dealing with metaphysics. Consider the implications. If you're in that legislature and you concede, I'm not talking about in your personal life, I'm talking about as a member of the legislature. If you concede it's true or possible that there's an otherworldly, supernatural place, a non-physical place like a heaven or a spirit world, and you say, and there's a supernatural, omnipotent God who could smite us all down or change the facts of reality instantly by clicking his fingers. Now you might believe this, but I'm saying beyond that, if you were actually to be in the legislature and take that position with respect to the decisions you're going to make in the legislature, that this is possible, that there's this other realm, what does that imply? You can't with any credibility at that point deny the other guy's claim that although his laws appear illogical or inconsistent with the facts of reality, they're actually consistent with the demands of his own supernatural place or the imperceivable reality. You see, you have no way. You've conceded that there's no one reality to be consistent with, and you've just given him everything he needs because you're saying my guesses about reality are no better than yours and no worse than yours. So if your reality requires us to all murder a woman every Friday, well, maybe that's true. I don't know. That's what reality requires. Mine requires that we all give all the money from our bank account to the guy who sells fish, because that's just what my reality is, my belief about reality. As soon as you give away, as soon as you allow in the legislature decisions to be based on something other than observable reality, you've lost the game. And you've got nothing but disagreement. A libertarian cannot, therefore, govern consistently with the facts of reality because they will not agree on the facts of reality. They're saying, as a libertarian, I don't care about such things. We are agreeing to disagree about such things. And I'm saying that's not possible. When you're in that legislature and Dalton McGuinty says, should we have prayer in the legislature? What is he doing? He's saying, should we ask for guidance? And some of the prayers actually ask for guidance. They literally say this. Should we ask for guidance from not one, but 8 or 9 different alleged gods about the decisions we're going to make in this legislature? And we know that all of those gods are associated with all of these different views on what reality is, whether there's an afterlife or not, whether you're reincarnated or what have you. And if you're asking for legal advice, lawmaking advice from a god who believes you're reincarnated, you're going to get different answers than if you're making your decisions on the basis of a view of reality from a god that says, I can erase the earth just like that, I can smite you down, there will be a cauldron of fire and I'm going to throw some of you into it, and etc. And some of you are going to go into the afterlife and some of you are going to go into a hell. If you start allowing those considerations into your lawmaking process, freedom is gone. You have to be consistent with reality or you'll never get to the end point, which is consensual relations between people.
The Mideast is a perfect example of that. Rand used to always call reality the arbiter, the final arbiter.
Yes.
If you can't agree on reality, then you have to work on something else, and it's just he says, she says. That's what it all boils down to. And so that's why you have eternal conflict. The consequence of that is conflict, and eventually war and death. And you can see that it's just an incredible laboratory experiment in the Mideast there, because that's the extreme of it. What we're witnessing here is a lesser extreme example of it, as our quote-unquote democracy is deteriorating more and more towards that because of that lack of reality being part of the arbitrations process, if you want to call it that.
The lawmaking process.
Right.
Yeah. So what by inviting even more prayer and even more alleged gods into the legislature, as we have, we've made it that much more difficult to achieve a government that governs according to reality, reason, self, and consent. And so as it, sorry.
So maybe it won't be long before they'll kick religion right out of there and put it back where it's supposed to be.
In the churches, and exactly.
Okay, I have a few comments or questions or whatever
Sure.
about all at the meeting in London here a few weeks ago. I brought up the same point, which is I sense obviously a general dislike of libertarians, or at least of the
Not dislike of libertarians,
philosophies
the philosophy.
of the way in which they bring forward their positions. But okay, so someone like Ron Paul is an example. He's Christian. He believes in God, and he's against abortion. But then he would come out with things like, I would never use my belief in God in the legislature. I would never even use my belief against abortion to make any law preventing anybody else from having one.
Right.
I also wouldn't put any money for any government to spend on anybody who would want one, on and on and on. It seems consistent, but some of this conversation here, which is that out of our legislature, 308 or 107 in Ontario, whatever, it seems like throughout history, they're all Christians. They all have a belief in God or a God, some God. That even his comment, which is the one that I like, the Religious movie, we should abolish religion from most society, including politics. But as an objectivist, doesn't that self-defeat the idea of reality? Like, these people do believe. Ron Paul is a big believer in, libertarianism, freedom, and yet over all of the books he's read on Ayn Rand and everything else, he still believes in a superpower, a god, a mysticism, whatever. So no matter how much we might want to idealistically think people are going to be rational, and after 10 years of study come to the conclusion that there are no, I'm an atheist, I'm a whatever, I'm a this now, because it's the only rational conclusion. That doesn't that self-defeat kind of what we're getting at, which is,
well,
I'm trying to formulate my
That's okay, and come back with it if you. But what I'm saying is, Ron Paul clearly, if I don't know if everything you said there is perfectly accurate. Let's say it is. Yeah, let's say he's drawn a complete wall between his religious beliefs, right down the wall, right down the line, and the way he makes decisions in the legislature. Let's say that as a member of the legislature, he only looks at the facts of reality. He only uses his rational faculty to decide what's right and what's wrong. He only puts first the pursuit of a person, the governs happiness by their own efforts, and he makes at every turn laws that are designed to make sure that relations between individuals are consensual. He's doing his job as he's governing properly, as that's all we're saying. Mm-hmm. And so, but my point is because you're asking about libertarianism. Libertarianism. I'm not talking about libertarians. I would say he is a libertarian, but libertarianism itself has no answer. So the philosophy, if you will, is only political. It doesn't have an answer about whether or not we should.
But isn't that consistent with the fact that even somebody like Ron Paul is has a contradictory philosophy? How can you believe in God and also?
No, his contradiction is on a personal level. The contradiction is not in the legislative level. And Paul and I, we talk. Some of the excerpts you saw in the videos last night, especially with Christine Williams. I don't know if you know this, but CTS out of Burlington, that's a religious station, heavily religious.
100 Huntley Street, that's what.
Yeah, and boy, you should see the studios there. That's Hollywood done.
Sure,
let me tell you.
Half the studios I go into are, like you said, 100% religious almost.
Yes. Now the irony is, they know that Paul and I are essentially atheists.
Yeah.
They call us all the time. They agree with us. They love our politics, and I've discussed many times, even with Muslims and with Christians sitting at the same table, what do you think about secularism? Man, they're all into it. Because they know that if they aren't, they'll all be killing each other. And that again comes down to if you don't have, and they can't explain it. They might go there they look at historical. That's all they know, the history. They know, well, gee, if we don't have a secular government, we're in trouble. They can't see the principle behind it. They just know the history is that, well, wherever there's a secular government, people are doing real well compared to where they have a religious government. And they also realize each person's religion depends upon, their freedom of religion depends on granting it equally to the other. Until you have a big majority rule in one religion favor. And then you'll find out where those principles suddenly matter. Yeah. And that's the big fear of Islam. Everybody says Islam has a plan to take over just by demographics. Eventually. Oh yeah, they're going to be all very tolerant and very secular until they have that majority.
Actually, that's not necessarily true. You have Syria and Iraq, which were secular governments. There was no Sharia law.
Yes. And the other thing is that it's not necessarily a plan. I think it's just, a question of, one day you wake up, it's the next election, and you start to realize that 59% of the people on the street all believe the same religion you do. Now you're going to say, well, what the heck? Why not govern that way? Why not govern according to our religious tenets? Who cares about the other 30, 40%? And I think some people have learned their lessons the hard way with respect to their religions. North America was practically founded because of religion.
And how many atheists will say, well, I'm an atheist, but I hold Judeo-Christian values, right? You hear that all the time. And what that generally means is, I believe that thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's good, which aren't Christian. Those are all from the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament. And if you read, for example, John McMurray, who's a philosopher I like a lot, he redefines Christianity entirely, not so much as a religion, as a universal Catholicism. That's basically what it's all about. Roman rule.
Yeah. I'm so curious how an atheist government or an atheist leader would handle these type of situations where on your first day in the legislature they say, all right, ready for prayer?
Now be careful about the word atheist too. It's just because a person's an atheist doesn't mean
irrational.
He holds to reality, reason, self-consent. It just means he's rejected that one irrationality, perhaps in favor of 10 other irrationalities.
When I was in the Board of Education, they sometimes had prayer. And as an atheist, I just sat there and did not bow my head. I did not speak. I allowed them to do whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
But I always thought, as you did too, I just sat there as well. But if I was the one standing there, if I was the teacher or the principal, I wouldn't allow this charade to happen.
Right.
This is insanity.
Well, and let me just break in right there, because during the break we had, Robert said, you know, it would be useful to talk about democracy because so many people think it means majority rule or whatever they vote for, and etc. So let me just very quickly talk about why Freedom Party is against prayer in the legislature, and that is, we think that laws should be made by human beings for human beings according to the nature of humans, which is that rational thinking, happiness pursuing thing. And if you break those words down, democracy and theocracy, you basically end up with people power or God power. Not people rule. That's a different word. That's a different word. It's archy, okay? Archy is the extension there. Who's the ruler? Anarchy is no ruler.
That's right.
Okay, but
or without any ruler.
Yeah, but Kratos, or I can't remember the exact, is about power. It's talking about where the authority comes from, not who exercises the authority, but where it comes from.
Or even how they got there.
Right.
How they got the authority.
How they got the authority is a separate. So democracy means people power. The power comes from the people that are being governed.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's true, it is not the case that the legislature gets its authority from a god or a law or anybody's god. So why are they praying to one? They effectively are saying, we are not a democracy, we are a god power nation. And that is not what we are. We are not governed by the wishes of anyone's god. Our government, it does not get its authority from anyone's god. Our government is not the hand of anyone's god. And if we don't learn that lesson pretty quickly, we're just paving the way for those who in other countries would like to come here and make sure that we do use government as nothing but the hand of God. So libertarians might not care. They might even prefer to have more prayer in the legislature. Freedom Party says, no flipping way. We need no prayer as an official part of legislature. You want to go and pray before you come in, that's your own business. But it's not part of government. And that's one way in which metaphysics, not consent, but metaphysics is important to Freedom Party, to freedom, and to government. It's not an issue that has nothing to do with everyday politics. Metaphysics is, commitment to reality is a part of governing properly.